Okay, so let's get into this. We're diving into, well, a pretty fascinating area today. Game dog conditioning.
Yeah, it sounds specific, but it's based on this really interesting historic interview with Don Mayfield.
Exactly. And you might think, game dogs? What's that got to do with me?
Yeah.
But honestly, the principles here, they really echo a lot about human fitness, about pushing limits.
They absolutely do. So for this deep dive, our main source is a YouTube video. It's an interview with Don Mayfield talking about his life conditioning American Pit Bull Terriers. He's been deep in this world since, what, 1972? In rural Texas. So think of this source as like a concentrated shot of real-world knowledge on getting the absolute most out of physical potential.
In this deep dive, it's really for you listening. If you want to get right to the core of something, understand the main ideas without wading through everything yourself, this is for you. Our goal isn't just to, list what Mayfield said. It's to dig into the why behind it.
Yeah.
What are the actual principles, and how do they connect to, well, bigger ideas about health, conditioning, peak performance, stuff that matters to anyone, really.
And it's fascinating how his environment, living out there in rural Texas, making his living from these dogs, how that directly shaped his understanding.
Yeah, that direct feedback loop.
Exactly. He even mentions the local redneck culture, the whole beard growing thing.
Yeah.
It just paints a picture of someone completely immersed.
Deep roots.
Totally.
And it wasn't just abstract for him, was it? He talks about keeping specific dog collars, like working collars.
Right, as memory triggers.
Yeah, triggers for the dogs,
Yeah.
the conditioning, the experiences. It's tangible.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where it gets really interesting for, broader application. Mayfield himself apparently realized that understanding how to get a dog into peak shape, it gave him huge insights into his own body. For health, he clarifies, not for fighting or anything like that.
And that just highlights this powerful idea, doesn't it? How biological principles often cross species. His close observation, just watching the dog.
It changes.
Yeah, seeing how sensitive they were, change the feed a bit, tweak the exercise, and boom, visible results.
Which is exactly what happens with us, right?
Yeah.
Small changes in diet, in training, you see it.
Precisely. The insight isn't just diet matters, it's more nuanced, like how the ratio of nutrients, the quality things Mayfield was likely seeing, how that has such a visible impact, totally transferable to human nutrition.
And he took that knowledge and actually applied it to himself. He talks about this personal 7-year cycle for his own conditioning.
Intense work, then rest.
Right. And he straight up says he learned that pattern from watching the dog's training cycles.
So what does that tell you? It's this fundamental need to balance pushing limits with, recovery, letting the body rebuild, vital for long-term health, whether you're a dog or a human.
Then there are vitamins. He noticed they help the dogs.
Saw their energy levels change.
Yeah, a direct observation. So he started taking vitamins himself. Just reinforces how important those micronutrients are for energy, for just feeling well.
And the food itself, the main diet, he talks about seeing how different feeds, different meats, literally changed how the dogs looked, their physique.
Again, direct parallel. The fuel you put in matters, not just calories, but the type of fuel.
And his own conditioning methods weren't just lifting weights or something. He mentions gardening.
Which involves all sorts of movements, right?
Yeah, varied physical demands. And swimming regularly. He stressed building strength gradually, over years, consistency, long-term view.
Now, here's a really interesting thought he had. Mayfield apparently believed it was actually, easier to get a dog to its absolute peak than to do it for yourself.
Huh. Easier on another being.
Yeah, and he even suggested a dog's peak in some ways might, exceed what humans can do. But then he flips it.
Okay.
He says the real challenge, the tougher fight, is the battle with yourself.
The habits.
Exactly. Controlling smoking, drinking too much, bad diet.
Yeah.
That internal discipline. He compares that struggle to a match between two top-tier dogs.
Yeah.
A test of pure willpower.
That really makes you think about where, true mastery is. Maybe overcoming your own ingrained stuff, your self-sabotage. Maybe that's a bigger win than just hitting a physical peak.
This is more holistic, right? Mind and body.
Definitely. Mental discipline being key.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the historical context. Because Mayfield didn't just, appear with all this knowledge.
No, he's very open about starting from zero. Didn't know conditioning, handling, even the dog family lines. Nothing.
Shows some real humility there. And he stresses how vital mentors were. People like Earl Tudor.
Frank Fitzwater.
Yeah, he relied on experienced hands. It really underlines the value of learning from people who've been deep in something for a long time, especially in these, nuanced fields.
Absorbing that embedded knowledge.
Right.
And he paints quite a picture of the dog matching scene back in the 60s and 70s. Yeah, it was legal then. He mentions local sheriffs often knew about it, sometimes were even there.
Wow. And diverse crowds, apparently. These shows grew, especially in Texas, becoming national, even international events.
It shows this real sense of community, this shared, intense dedication within that subculture, even though the activity itself is, well, controversial now, a whole world with its own rules.
He pinpoints the 70s as this unique peak, like a golden era for competition. Really skilled conditioners, top handlers.
And a key thing then was matching dogs that were super closely related.
Right. Half-brothers, parent-child pairing, siblings, cousins. Often representing different regions but from similar lines.
Best of the best, testing against similar genetics.
Which suggests a really, really deep understanding of genetics and breeding within that community, doesn't it? Rigorously testing bloodlines and methods.
Yeah, but he also notes a shift later, late 70s into the 90s, towards more out-crossed breeding, mixing lines more.
And he sounds a bit skeptical about it, contrasting it with the older, close breeding era. Sort of implies newcomers maybe didn't grasp the foundations in the same way.
Which speaks to that potential loss of, deep accumulated knowledge when practices change quickly.
And the passion involved.
Yeah.
It was intense. He talks about dogmen betting literally everything they had.
Yeah, house, car, everything.
It just shows the incredible commitment, the high stakes, financial and otherwise.
Definitely wasn't a casual hobby for these guys. It was central to their lives.
Okay, so let's get into Mayfield's actual conditioning methods. He mentions the cat mill. Sounds odd. What exactly was that?
Right. It's basically a machine, a device specifically for conditioning dogs, not for cats.
Okay, good clarification.
And he talks about how it evolved. The early ones, like Earl Tudor's, were apparently pretty rudimentary, wood wagon wheel hubs.
Wow.
But Mayfield innovated. He built one using like a Ford car rear axle. Yeah. And then later, a much bigger, more balanced design. Pipes, cables, with a radius of like 27 or 28 feet, constantly trying to improve the tool.
And using it wasn't just let the dog run wild, was it?
No, not at all. He really stresses controlled work. Walking, trotting, not just flat out running.
And the bait. Hides, cats, rabbits.
Yeah, initially to get them going. But the real goal, he says, was to get the dog working intensely without the bait. Just pure focus. He talks about the specific odd look a really focused conditioned dog gets.
Interesting. So it's about shifting from external motivation to internal drive. Building stamina, mental concentration.
Exactly.
And the intensity. He wasn't messing around. After he quit his job in '72, he was working dogs for hours every single day.
Yeah, he mentions taking short naps in a special dog house.
Right, this 10 by 10 building right by the cat mill, set up just for full-time dog care. The dedication is just immense.
That dog house is such a symbol of his complete immersion, isn't it? All in.
And it paid off, clearly. His dogs got into such incredible shape that other guys in the game are just, baffled.
Scratching their heads, he says.
Yeah. And he mentions his dogs sometimes commanded crazy high betting odds. That's a pretty clear signal they were seen as superior. External validation.
It is. And it's interesting how his influence spread. Even Maurice Carver.
The treadmill guy, right?
Yeah, known for treadmill conditioning. But he'd apparently call Mayfield frequently, asking about his cat mill methods.
So Mayfield's expertise was recognized even by people using different techniques.
Exactly. Carver saw the value in Mayfield's deep understanding of physiology, even if applied differently. Knowledge is knowledge.
And that funny side note about the name, Carver called his mill a Jenny.
Yeah, after the donkeys and horse walkers, which caused confusion later. Mayfield clarifies, no, the original name cat mill came from sometimes using cats as bait way back when.
Ah, so a bit of linguistic history there. Clears that up.
Provides that context.
Okay, now, we need to address a more, let's say, complicated aspect. Performance-enhancing substances.
Right. This was part of the era.
Mayfield talks about the 60s having this, well, more permissive attitude generally towards drugs. Amphetamines, diet pills, even cocaine were more out there in society.
That context is important. It wasn't happening in a vacuum.
And he specifically tells the story about Azium, this vet medicine.
Used for shock, severe stress in animals.
Right. And how they saw it dramatically affect the stamina of a dog named Bullet in a big match. The dog just kept going, unexpectedly.
That's a key moment. Early adoption of pharmaceuticals, seeing these immediate, sometimes drastic performance effects.
Before stuff like Azium, he mentions more traditional things were used, B12 shots, liver extract, iron.
More like supplements we'd recognize.
Yeah. But then the experimentation shifted towards hormones, male hormones, testosterone.
Uh-huh.
And Mayfield even collaborated with, like, an animal researcher up in Alaska.
Yeah, trying to understand how to balance things. Like Azium helped keep the body cool, but then hormones could boost adrenaline. It shows a surprising level of, like, scientific inquiry, right? Trying to optimize performance systematically.
Definitely trying to understand the how and why.
And he was open about sharing his formulas, his blend of shots. He names people he taught.
So this knowledge spread fast within that community. Everyone looking for an edge.
Naturally.
But, and this is crucial, Mayfield makes a really strong point. He says, yeah, the shots could maybe elevate a dog with mediocre conditioning.
Right, bring it up a level.
But true, peak conditioning, the kind he aimed for, that could still beat the shots.
And that leads right into his ultimate philosophy, doesn't it? This idea that pharmacology has limits.
Exactly. He believed real peak conditioning, the absolute top level, went way beyond what drugs could do. It was about developing every part of the body naturally to its max.
A return to basics in a way, but taken to an extreme level of understanding, maximizing the body's own potential.
And his core idea for achieving that, it centers on something incredibly fundamental. Water control.
Simple, but profound in its application.
He talks about the importance of a high red blood cell count. Helps keep the body cool, helps endurance.
More oxygen transport, better heat dissipation, critical stuff.
And here's the key insight. He figured out that by carefully managing how much water a dog drank, he could naturally concentrate its blood.
Increasing the red blood cell concentration that way.
Yeah. Basically mimicking some effects of Azium, like the cooling potential, but without messing with the dog's natural adrenaline.
That's really something. Using the body's own systems. He experimented with this.
Oh, yeah. Watched the changes in blood counts when restricting water. Then applied it to daily training. Less water before workouts to stop overheating, make the work more efficient.
A very nuanced approach, managing hydration down to the workout level.
And then, before a match, he'd restrict water for maybe up to 24 hours. To get the dog into that absolute peak state, he describes it as a quiver state.
Oh, wow. Super alert, primed.
Yeah, and he was adamant, that level, that peak, you just couldn't get there with shots alone.
His conviction in the superiority of natural, albeit extreme, conditioning.
And finally, the timelines. This wasn't a quick fix. He preferred at least 6 weeks for conditioning, but sometimes much longer, even up to a year.
Patience, dedication. It underlines that true conditioning is a long game.
So wrapping this up, for you listening, what are the big takeaways here?
Well, several things, I think. First, just the surprising connection between understanding animal conditioning and, well, human health and fitness.
Yeah, those cross-species principles.
But then there's the whole cyclical nature of performance, pushing hard, but also the absolute need for recovery.
Balance.
Right. Also the power of just observing, watching for subtle physiological changes in response to diet, to training.
Paying attention to the details.
Definitely. And we got that historical context, seeing how people pushed limits in this very specific, intense environment.
And maybe the most surprising thing, how something as basic, as fundamental as water, could be seen as the key to unlocking peak condition.
It really stands out.
I think the potential aha moment for you listening could be realizing that even these, seemingly extreme practices from a niche world, they can actually reveal basic biological truths that apply to anyone interested in their own health, their own performance.
Absolutely. Which leads to maybe a final thought, a question for you to chew on.
Yeah.
Is there some overlooked element in your own approach to health or fitness or even just well-being? Something seemingly simple like water was for Mayfield that might hold way more power than you realize.
Or maybe, does seeing this level of intense, holistic dedication in Mayfield's world offer any lessons about just pursuing mastery?
Yeah.
In whatever field you're passionate about.
Good questions. Definitely something to think about as you go about your day.